Go big or go home.
You hear the tune, you see the title, you know what time it is. Go big or go home is back. The crew is in the house. Robbie Hummel, Meghan McKeown. We got a lot to catch up on. A lot has happened. I love this because we actually get to talk about what's happened rather than us trying to predict the future. This is always better. A recap session. This is going to be our last episode of the Big Ten basketball season. Let's talk tourney. 2 Big Ten teams made it to the national title game. I don't think you could have asked for better outcomes when it comes to the Big Ten representing at the highest stage. Robbie, let's start with you. Your overall takeaways from the Big Ten tournament in terms of, the national tournament, NCAA tournament, when it comes to Big Ten teams, and also think ahead to some of the teams that are going to be joining the Big Ten next season.
Yeah, no, I think it was a really good tournament for Big Ten teams. And, so much was made of Michigan State being the only team last year to get to the Sweet 16. And you look at this season, Illinois is in the Elite Eight. They lose to UConn. No shame in that. UConn is pretty good. And then Purdue making the national title game kind of excited the demons of the FDU loss and played just an incredible Elite Eight game in Detroit against Tennessee to advance. Zach Edey was pretty much unbelievable. Second highest scorer in tournament history behind Glenn Rice. And Glenn Rice's numbers were absurd back in the late 80s. He scored 184 points, I think, in it would be 6 tournament games. So, yeah, unbelievable run, really good showing by the Big Ten. It was unfortunate that some of our teams got lumped into the 8-9 game because it's just – the 1 seeds were so much better, I felt like, than the 2s. And if you can get into the 7-10 or the 6-11, man, your chances to advance were so much higher. But Northwestern, Nebraska, the 8-9 game is tough. But to have 2 teams make it to the second weekend and advance the way they did, I thought it was a really positive tournament for the men's side of things in the Big Ten.
Robbie, what's the how can I get Zach Edey's hook shot? How can I try to replicate? It is like Kareem-esque, and I know that is a high comparison. But when I look at what he's able to do over his shoulder down in the paint, it is phenomenal.
Yeah, that right jump hook is his move, and with his size at 7'4", 300, but also the mobility that he has and the strength that he has, he moves people. He's like a glacier, you can do whatever, but you're not going to move him. You're not going to affect him. And when he gets his right jump hook, it's pretty much game over. But I did think in the Tennessee, and even early in the UConn game, he got to his left hand. He got to, with an up and under. He got over there. He's got a really solid low post game. And that was on display in the NCAA tournament. I just was amazed by the level of focus he played with. You could see how locked in that dude was. He was on a mission. From the time they lost to Fairleigh Dickinson last year to deciding to come back to school, he had one thing on his mind, that was get to the Final Four. They beat NC State in the Final Four, the first game there in that matchup, and then you run into UConn. I don't think anybody was beating them. Purdue had a phenomenal year, but UConn is probably going to be looked at as a generational team in terms of men's college basketball.
Wait, Robbie, did you just say that Zach Edey is 7'4"? He's 300 pounds?
I think so. That's what they list him at.
He carries 300 pounds well. That dude does not look like.
He's probably got a 6% body fat. They list him at 7'4", 300. Yeah.
Shoot, man. Sounds like an old
man. A lot of body to kind of put that weight. That's a long body.
Well distributed. Okay. Anyways, sidebar. Sorry, Zora.
No, I love a sidebar. I wanted to go back to when Purdue secured a spot in the Final Four because Meghan, you and I were conversing about this. And Robbie, your clip that
I get to talk about this again. Love this.
Yes.
Oh, you've had to talk about it everywhere, I'm sure. I felt it.
We were texting. Zora and I were texting about it. We were so happy for you.
We were genuinely happy for you. Where does that emotion come? Explain to the people why, even though you weren't on the court that day, you deserve to be a part of the celebration of your Boilermakers making it to the Final Four. What overcame you in that moment?
First of all, Elliot Bloom is the director of basketball operations. He comes over and gives me a hug. and says some nice things. And that softened me. And then Paul Lusk, who recruited me and is an assistant, he came over and did the same thing. That softened me even more. Then we had Coach Painter come on, and he did the post-game interview with us. And it was amazing to me that this is this guy's biggest win of his coaching career to that point. And all he did was deflect credit to everywhere else. He gave it to former players. He gave it to the players on this team. He gave it to his staff. You know, he's just a selfless guy. And to hear him kind of credit, you know, I guess I was one of his first recruiting classes, and he was very complimentary of myself, E'Twaun Moore, and Juwan Johnson. You know, that was part of it. But then on top of that, just the years of frustration, right? Like, you understand the history of Purdue going back to the late 80s, where there have been teams that could have made it and have fallen just a little bit short. And I played on one of those teams where we're 22-3. We've got 4 wins over top 10 teams. 2 of them are on the road. 2 of them are at home. And you're looking like you're going to be a 1 seed, and I blow my knee out. Then E'Twaun and Juwan decide to come back. I blow my knee out again, first day of practice. So I've always felt a little bit responsible in a way for the drought. So I'm like, well, we had a team that was good enough, and if I wouldn't have been shredding my knee, twice in 9 months, we could have had a team that goes to the Final Four. But we also, you look at that, you could also lose in the first round. You never know. But the worst part of it is the unknown of not even getting to play the games. That to me is the hardest part. And then you add in, I know how much those guys have put in, having lost to 3 straight double-digit seeds, the last 3 NCAA tournaments, and to see them get over the hump. They've been on a mission all year long. It was very emotional. I'm a little bit embarrassed. I looked up at one point and I'm like, there's like 30 cameras. This is bad. This is bad. But
Robbie,
I couldn't stop.
Not a sign of weakness.
Yeah, it was a soft moment.
No, it's emotional awareness. If anything, it's
yeah.
relatable, and you should not feel embarrassed, and you should not carry that weight. I'm sure.
No. I understand that, but you just.
Yeah,
it's one of those things as a player. How do you not feel that way? You when you want something that bad, and our team won. We stacked it up every practice, Final Four. That was the goal. It was in Indianapolis. Like, that was the goal for our team. And, when that happened, it's something that probably will never go away.
Yeah. Fair. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad that you got to be there, though. Cool. That's amazing. Well,
I was professional until that moment.
Coach, yeah. As you should have. We were genuinely happy for you all.
No, thank
and
you.
I know we're not supposed to. I was rooting for the Boilermakers. To get over that hump in the title game. They started off strong. And
we've been through a lot. It's good now. Everyone can stop giving us a hard time about losing to a 16 seed. Or this is what you got to do. You take the pain of losing to a 16 with the guarantee that you will play in the national title game. They're 2 for 2.
UVA did the same thing, right?
Yeah,
they won it.
They won it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Let's go to the women's side, Meghan. Recap. I mean,
oh my gosh,
so much happened. But where do you begin?
A lot's happening. Where did we begin? Was really surprised. We'll begin where I was. I was at Ohio State. Was shocked that they lost to Duke. Really good Duke team. Went to the Sweet 16, deserved it, all the things. They outplayed Ohio State in that game. But it felt like Ohio State had the team and the region where they could get to a Final Four. So obviously frustrating that they fell short in that round of 32 game. You look at, getting 7 teams in from the Big Ten to the NCAA tournament. And was really impressed with Iowa. I will say at the very beginning of it, I did not think they were going to make the Final Four. Thought their regional was too hard. Thought they weren't playing great basketball. But after they got out of the first and second rounds, it was like something clicked and they started playing elite basketball. You look at what they did against LSU, how locked in that team was. And Gabby Marshall after the game was like, I have never wanted to beat a team so badly. And I've never been so locked in my entire life to a game. This whole entire season, like Iowa has handled the Caitlin Clark phenomenon with so much grace and hasn't allowed it to seep into the locker room. Like it takes a lot. At the end of the day, like no matter what team you're on, there's going to be egos, and everybody was able to put their ego aside in order to allow this great player to shine the way she did this year. So I give them a ton of credit. Sydney Falter and Kay Martin were 2 X factors down the stretch. I mean, you can't say enough about, especially Sydney Falter. When Molly Davis went down on senior day, I didn't know what Iowa was going to look like. She was such a huge piece all season long. Sydney Falter comes into the starting lineup, and not only is she still doing all of like the dirty work, diving on the floor, she's now scoring. And then you have that with Kate Martin, her ability to shoot the 3 down the stretch. I was so impressed with and so happy for her because I know how hard she's been working on developing that 3-point shot more consistently. So you put all these pieces together. Caitlin Clark did not disappoint whatsoever. And that's what's so crazy, Zora. We've talked about this. No matter how big the moment is, like Caitlin Clark shows up every game. I've never seen that before. I think as a great player, you're entitled to have a day off or so, or an off night, but she has never had an off night. Like that's not who she is. And she doesn't get nervous. And I don't know how she is such a machine when she's out there, but it is a spectacle. And the last thing I will say is this: for those who say that she's not the greatest college basketball player of all time because she hasn't won a national championship, I think it's a very hard comparison to make between GOATs and winning championships in the pros and college. In college, you got to play more individual games to make it to that point. And Caitlin Clark didn't play with All-Americans. She was the only All-American on her team. She's only McDonald's All-American on her team. She played with really good Big Ten players, but not as good as you look at like the UConns and the Tennessees and the LSUs who have had All-Americans on their team and made it all the way to the championship games and won titles. The fact that Caitlin Clark, with a quote-unquote less talented roster, got her team to back-to-back national championships. In my mind, that makes her the greatest player of all time in college.
You can't, and now no one will ever wear 22 again at Iowa. The university announcing that they're going to, rightfully so, retire her number. I don't even know where Caitlin starts to reflect. I have trouble reflecting. Again, we were there for some big moments, but not all the moments, right? And so, what a season! Not just for the Hawkeyes, but for women's basketball as a whole, and specifically the Big Ten. There was so, you talk about a team like Michigan State, right? And a new coach with a new philosophy and what they were able to do. Indiana, just some really, really good teams. Ohio State coming up short. Could you argue that maybe they peaked too early? I don't know. They had such a fantastic regular season. Who am I missing? Michigan, they
Indiana.
just simply want to get into the tournament, right? Indiana.
And Indiana put up a fight against South Carolina. That was a 4-point game with 2 minutes to go.
They did.
Yeah.
You can't say enough about Mackenzie Holmes. It's just a great. I'm such a believer and a fan of this league. The Big Ten is it when it comes to basketball on both sides, and that showed itself. National championship game. There was no other conference had 2 teams. You know what I'm saying? You got UConn and Purdue on one side, so that's Big East and Big Ten, and then you had SEC and another Big Ten team on the women's side in the national championship game. So just superb season all around. Let's go down the list of some of the league awards this season. Meghan, we'll start with the women. You tell me, surprised? Do you agree? Disagree? All right. And of course, you got to give why. Player of the year, Caitlin Clark. I don't know if you need to go into detail. Everyone's like, all right, check. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Retweet.
Yeah.
Defensive player of the year. So there was 2. Celeste Taylor was voted on by the coaches. Sarah Williams, Wisconsin, voted on by the media.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree with either. I thought Sarah Williams, and what she was able to do in the paint and protect the paint was phenomenal. But Celeste Taylor, obviously, up top in that Ohio State press. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and perimeter defensively, from a perimeter defensive standpoint, Celeste Taylor, I think, is elite. But to me, the year Sarah Williams had, I think she would have deserved to have been defensive player of the year.
Freshman of the year, Natalie Potts. There was a lot of talk about freshman at Purdue, Mary Ashley Stevenson, and then Gordon Grholski at Minnesota. Those were the three to me.
Yeah.
But Nebraska, the season that they had, that's the one team we forgot to talk about getting in the tournament. But
Yeah.
Natalie Potts, the year she had.
Yeah, I thought Natalie Potts is on a better team. I thought Mary Ashley Stevenson was more impactful on her team as a freshman.
Okay. Coach of the year, Kevin McGuff. We had talked. I don't disagree at all. The other name that maybe I would have thought of was Freilich at Michigan State, just with the turnover and everything. But the regular season that Ohio State had really was elite.
It's so difficult to win the Big Ten regular season. Like, to me, it's harder to win the regular season than like the tournament, because like the tournament you can kind of get lucky with matchups and whatnot, but you have to night in and night out perform at a high level to win the conference title. So McGuff winning it is well deserved.
Sixth player of the year, Theron Halleck, Michigan State, well deserved. Robin Freilich often talks about the fact that she felt like she had 7 starters with her rotation. Another name that we both threw out there was Sydney Fulton, and she proved that she deserves to be in a starting lineup next season.
Yeah, she's definitely going to be starting. She started the whole entire month of March because of the Molly Davis injury. I would have probably given the award to Theron Halleck, though, just with how good Michigan State was this season and how surprising they were, and Theron Halleck really improved. Yeah.
Let's go now to the men, Robbie. Right? No arguments here, Zach Edey. He's proved it time and time again.
Yeah. If you're the 2-time National Player of the Year, you probably should be 2-time Big Ten Player of the Year as well. So no issue with that selection.
I do want to take this moment, though. Your thoughts on his transition to the league? I know there's a lot of opinions out there. Where do you stand on the parts of his game that will transition immediately and the parts that maybe he needs to work on in order to be better when he gets that next level?
Yeah, I think his rebounding will definitely translate. That's something that always, when you look at college to pro, it's something that you can count on being a consistent. So he'll be a good rebounder at that level. I think he'll be able to score. I think when you look at how big he is and how strong he is, I think that jump hook will still serve him well at the pro level. Things to work on, pick and roll defense. Even though I thought he really improved this year in that regard, he's gotten so much better at protecting the rim, and also playing that drop coverage where if the guard's way behind, he switches it out. He did a pretty good job this year, I thought, of containing the bounce. And if they did get by him, he'd go to block it. So I think that he still has a ways to go because the guards just get better and better at that level. The point guards in the NBA that's to me the toughest spot, because those dudes have to be so good to be that small and to be that effective in the NBA. And then I guess just continuing to be able to prove that he can get up and down the floor. I thought he did that really well this year, but there are definitely question marks about how can he play in a game that is so athletic and so fast. But he's an anomaly, 7'4", 300 and runs the floor well and rebounds outside of his area, gets to the floor. You just don't see many 7-footers like him. He is a generational college player, and I think the cool thing about this is he's been doubted his whole life. He's being doubted now going to the pros, and I can't wait to see what he does with that.
Are we going to see him on an Olympic team this summer with Canada?
He's got a good chance. That World Cup team was stacked for Canada, and he made it. I think similar to his NBA role that he'll have early on in his career, maybe it's just situational, but for certain times when you need a 7'4" dude to get a rebound or to put on the ball to make an inbound pass really hard, there is value in that, and he does add that.
I feel like everybody could use a 7'4" player to.
You can't teach that.
Yeah.
No. I can want to be 7'4" as bad as I want. I will always be 6'8". I promise you that.
And that's not bad at all either, Robbie. Defensive Player of the Year, Ace Baldwin Jr., Penn State, deserved.
Yeah, I'm good with that. He is so active. He blows things up. He was great in their press. He's as good as just about anybody I've seen in basketball at being behind the play and just making chaos happen. He's great at the back tap. He had games where he had 7 and 8 steals. I think Ace Baldwin is deserving to be the Defensive Player of the Year.
2 Freshmen of the Year, one at Iowa, one at Indiana. How did they impact their teams this season?
I think Mackenzie and Baco really made a push forward their end of the season when Indiana played better. And that was one of those deals. where maybe early on you wouldn't have said that he was going to win that award, but he definitely, I thought, was deserving. And my man in Iowa, my brain is literally not working.
Owen Freeman. Owen Freeman,
thank you. Jeez. I only saw 10 of his games this year. Yeah, he had a great freshman year. You know, he can face up and play. He can play in the post. He was pretty good defensively, protected the rim. I think Fran McCaffrey's got a really, really nice group of freshmen that if they can keep those guys together, they're going to have a chance. But Owen Freeman certainly was the best on that team and one of the best in the conference all year long. I think he won Big Ten Freshman of the Week 9 or 10 times, which is that's an achievement for sure.
Couple more categories for you. Coach of the Year. There was 2, Nebraska and Purdue, and teams that have, you know, different goals and at different parts. Why do they both deserve to be recognized?
Well, I think because Fred Hoiberg, you know, coming into this year, it was a kind of one of those make or break seasons for him, and now I'd have to think he'll get a contract extension. The way that they've played since February of not this year, but the year prior, they've been tremendous. And for that, I think they were picked 9th or 10th, and they finished, 3rd? So that he was deserving. And then Matt Painter, the team that Purdue has to win the Big Ten back-to-back years by multiple games, that just does not happen. So I thought co-coach of the year was a good choice here, and both guys were very deserving.
Last one more accolades for your Boilermakers. Mason Gillis, 6th man of the year.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think for Purdue fans now in the portal, Purdue kind of a scholarship crunch, and I guess that it was one of those deals where they had talked about what he wanted to do, and it was communicated out that maybe he was ready to play pro ball or whatever, but now wants to stay in college. So that will be weird. But Mason had a great year. You know, he had a phenomenal season, shot the ball so well, brings toughness, rebounds, and, you know, when you're playing around Zach Edey, you need guys that can let it fly, and he can do that. 48% from 3 on the season. He will certainly be missed at Purdue. He brought a level of toughness as well, had been there, understood the program, understood the culture. Yeah, just a tremendous year. And I kind of thought the other guys that were maybe candidates to win the award just sort of fell by the wayside end of the season. C.J. Wilcher didn't shoot it well end of the year. Mason Gillis really by the end of the season I thought made sense.
It's the end of an era for so many reasons for both Purdue and Iowa. If we're talking about superstars Zach Edey, Caitlin Clark. Where do these teams go from here? Is it, Meghan, is it Iowa hitting transfer portal, or is it relying on recruiting? How do you think Lisa Bluter and company, you can't try to replicate, it's going to be all new, but where do they go from here?
Well, the good news is they still have Sydney Fulcher and Hannah Stolke, so that's a really good base to have moving forward. But they have a good freshman class coming in. I'm curious if they try to go into the portal and find a point guard who has experience. That could be something to keep an eye out on. But, like, look, at the end of the day, like, you have 2 really good pieces that played a lot of minutes in big games coming back. So they'll be maybe not as dominant as they've been over the last couple of years, but will still be a factor when it comes to top teams in the Big Ten.
Well, and so many of the big names and talking about teams are going to be shifting, right? Like Mackenzie Holmes is gone. Ohio State, Sheldon. No more J.C. Sheldon. Yeah. So you could argue, like, I mean, let's look out for a Minnesota next year. Definitely want to look out for Michigan State. It'll be interesting. And that's why these, like, preseason, you never know how. I mean, so coming into the season, so many people had thoughts on Iowa, and I think they exceeded everybody's expectations.
Oh, yeah.
In terms
Hands
of
down.
Yeah. Okay, what about Purdue, Robbie, and the loss of Zach Edey?
Yeah, I mean, you can't replace that. They'll play differently next year, but they still have a really good core of players. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, those 2 guys will be juniors. And you look at also the way their freshmen played. Cam Heidi with that huge dunk against UConn. He had some nice moments. Miles Colvin, same thing. Both those guys played big minutes on a team that was ranked number 1 in the country for an extended period of time this year. Trey Coffin-Wren, I think, now gets a chance to shine. He'll be a guy that's more featured in their offense. And then on top of that, they bring in one of the best recruiting classes in school history. So they'll be younger. They'll be different, but there's still a lot of talent in West Lafayette, and I'm sure that they'll be a team that's in the mix again next year.
I hate to do this to you all, but you got to pick one favorite moment from the season. It could be in the conference tournament, it could be in the NCAA tournament or regular season. And I'm just gonna, like, keep talking to give you a couple extra seconds.
I got it. I got you. Colin Caitlin Clark's record-beating bucket when she beat Kelsey Plum's record. That was sick. She did in 2 minutes, 12 seconds. Logo 3. Awesome.
I still have the confetti from that celebration in my backpack because it was one of those where were you moments for sure. Robbie, did we talk enough for you to come up with a moment?
Yeah. That's a good choice there. Good pick, Megan. I'm gonna go at the Final Four. When I got to my seat, I was on the Wendy's Bleacher Report couch. We had like a watch party. So I was doing that, and I looked out, and it was like 5 minutes to game time, and there was like 45,000 or 50,000 Purdue fans in that place. It was packed. So to see that and to see the way the Purdue people travel out to the Final Four, that to me will be that's my favorite moment of the season.
That's awesome.
That's good.
And I'm living through you because I'm glad you got to be there. Before we close out this season, I just want to give a shout out to you two because both of you all called the NCAA tournament on television, did phenomenal jobs, and then had assignments the rest of the way. Like, seriously, you guys are amazing at what you do, fitting this in between everything. Robbie, I know you got games to call tonight. Megan, you did this from like arenas with shoot around in the background. Like,
Megan's the MVP. She was doing it everywhere.
No.
Everywhere.
Look, and Zora, shout out to you because you just rocked your first season of Big Ten play-by-play, made it seem like you've been doing it and covering the league for years. So it takes a lot of prep and a lot of work. You killed it.
Thank you. So glad we got to do this and debrief. Any parting words, Robbie? You got anything to say?
No, I look forward to next year. This little podcast has become a really fun part of the week, and it was nice to actually get to see Zora in person at the Big Ten tournament. Megan, I don't think I've seen you since maybe a night at BTN, but I do look forward to this, and it's always fun to talk some Big Ten hoops on the men's and women's side.
Yeah, always good, guys. So much fun.
All right, one time for the one time. Go big or
go home.
Go home.
Love it. Thanks, guys.